Omar, this list of stories that we're watching for 2026, it's a lot.
It is, but believe it or not, there are actually some positive stories there that we're going to be talking about. So stick around.
Welcome to this special year-end edition of your Iraq briefing, where we capture the top stories shaping Iraq and the Kurdistan region today. I'm Erik Gustafson.
And I'm Omar Nidawi, and today we're going to be looking at the 10 biggest stories that we're going to be watching in 2026. These are the stories that we think will be major factors in shaping Iraq's conditions in the new year. So, exciting stuff.
So grab a cup of eggnog or coffee and let's jump in. Let's start with the top story, number one.
Well, of course, the top story is government formation, which is the process that happens after elections. And in Iraq, this tends to be a very lengthy and complex process. On the one hand, you have Prime Minister Soudani, who is riding on incumbency and the fact that his coalition won 46 seats. At the same time, you have armed militias whose political factions or political wings in parliament won about 100 seats, about a third of parliament. And so they are going to be a major number here. And you have also important political actors like Nour al-Maliki, former prime minister, who are opposing Soudani's bid for a second term in office. At the same time, there is intense pressure from the U.S. on militias to disarm, and if they want, join politics as purely political factions. And there have been some signals from important militias, including Asab al-Haq, that they're willing to engage in a process, in a disarmament process like that. So it's going to be an interesting process to watch, and could really lead to a transformation in the way Iraq's next government is going to be different from the past.
That's really encouraging. And essentially, it's about upholding Iraq's constitution because, these armed actors should not be armed in parliament.
True, absolutely. But another thing to also very quickly to mention is that this is not just limited to the federal government of Iraq, but we also are still waiting for the Kurdistan region to form a government. They had an election in November of 2024, and they still have not formed a government that reflects those election results. So it's a nationwide situation.
Wow.
And speaking of nationwide situations, what's number two?
So number two is the planned closure of the Al-Hol camp in Syria. Now, what does this have to do with Iraq? This has to do with a camp that's been around because of the conflict with ISIS. And at one point, I think the camp had over 60,000 residents, mostly families from Syria and Iraq with perceived ties to ISIS. Again, mostly civilians, women, and children. Now that the number is lower, I believe it's about 15,000 or so residents are still at the camp. Among them, there are still over 4,000 Iraqis. And there are plans now, and you can follow this through our weekly reports, Isham, because I know you've been reporting on this, Omar. There are plans that the Iraqi government will repatriate the final numbers, the remaining 4,000 Iraqis that are at that camp, by June 2026. Now, there is a lot of pushback.
There's a lot of pushback because there are a lot of communities that were devastated by ISIS, and they are voicing strong objections for about these planned returns, and they have fears about radicalization. So there's a lot of actors who have, let's say, uncertainties about how this will impact security for them and for the country as a whole. So this will be a big development if it actually pulls through.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know the fears of radicalization are very real. ISIS is still an ideology that's out there and has inspired attacks around the world. So this is, I think, a legitimate fear that these communities have, that, the government needs to have the services in place to really help these communities repatriate and not, be a source of radicalization, but to transition into the social fabric of Iraq peacefully. So that said, there are still more than 1 million Iraqis that are displaced within Iraq that have yet to return to their homes. So this is still an ongoing process, the legacy of conflict in Iraq and transitioning toward peace and people being able to make that journey, find, a livelihood back in their home communities. That's still an ongoing process.
Indeed, indeed. And some people actually think that the militia disarmament could include provisions for militias relinquishing control of certain areas that have been where people were basically forced to leave, depopulated places like Jurf al-Sakha, for example, and
Yeah.
parts of Salahuddin province. So, it's all tied together.
Number three. What's
Okay.
number three?
Number three is about reconstruction or new construction and infrastructure, brick and mortar stuff. And a big story to watch for in 2026 is the completion of the Grand Fao port, which is an ambitious project that has been ongoing since 2010. It was launched in 2010, but has faced a lot of delays, cost runovers and things like that, and political disruptions and security disruptions. But it's finally coming together, and the government is expecting to have it operational in 2026. It will have the capacity to handle over 55 million tons of cargo a year, which would be a significant expansion of Iraq's ports capacity to handle commerce. And that is an important factor in this puzzle of making Iraq a hub for regional transport and even international transportation and trade, because the Grand Fao project is a key component of the Development Road Project, which is this ambitious project. Used to be called initially the Dry Canal, a corridor for transportation and trade that links the Persian Gulf or Arab Gulf to Europe through Turkey, through a network of highways and rail roads in Iraq at a cost of $17 billion or something like that. This has been I think the crown jewel of infrastructure projects for this for this period in Iraq, and a lot of hopes and ambitions are hinging on it. So
Wow.
if the port comes together, I think the rest could see strong momentum moving forward.
Wow. So that could be transformative for Iraq. Wow.
And not to forget here, I think another important piece of infrastructure that's also coming together in 2026 is a platform that Iraq is building to be able to receive and process LNG, that's liquefied natural gas. It's a boring piece of infrastructure, but it could be an important factor in Iraq gaining energy independence, especially from gas imports from Iran, because Iraq will have the ability, the freedom really, to buy LNG from countries like Qatar or even the United States and bring it by ships and regasify it using this facility and then pump it to Iraq's power plants without having to rely on really unreliable imports of natural gas from Iran, which have been very susceptible to disruptions, political and infrastructure related. And that causes a lot of troubles for Iraq's power generation. So that's coming up in June, hopefully. And we'll, I think, have an ability to process about 400 million cubic feet of gas per day, which is a significant amount of fuel.
And so what about also the capturing of gas within
Well,
Iraq?
there are ongoing projects to capture gas from existing gas fields, mostly existing oil fields that produce associated gas, and progress has been a little slow. We talked about this in more detail in a report that we produced in 2024 about gas flaring in Iraq, and there are problems with transparency and data. The Iraqi government every now and then claims improvements in the percentage of gas that is being captured compared to the percentage of gas that's being flared, just burned into the atmosphere to dispose of it, because it's a hazardous byproduct of oil production. It also has the potential of becoming very valuable fuel for energy production. The lack of baseline data for comparison has been a big issue. So there are on the books projects that will come online in late 2026 and early 2027. Iraq is eyeing zero flaring by 2028, but the lack of baseline data gives us a little bit of hesitancy to take these claims at face value.
Yeah. Well, related to that, because we're talking about a very important region of Iraq, number 4.
That is federalism in Basra. It's a small story, I think went largely overlooked, came out a week or two ago. But a civil society group actually in Basra has succeeded in getting the Iraqi High Electoral Commission to release forms that will allow civil society petitioners to collect signatures in support of a project to turn Basra into a federal region with basically semi autonomous powers, something similar, but on a lower scale, I think, than what we see in the Kurdistan region of Iraq. Iraq's constitution allows any province or group of provinces to claim the status of a federal region, which have expanded powers. They can have their own security forces. They can have their own local governments and ministries and expanded powers in running their own affairs with independence from federal government. So it's a long process, this transformation from a province to federal region, and we can for sure expect it to face a lot of hurdles, a lot of objections. Political parties, ruling political parties in Iraq have been very, very skeptical and wary of plots and plans to establish federal regions. They consider that Kurdistan region was a special case that needed to be accommodated, but that federalism elsewhere is a dangerous precedent. And we saw in 2012 when provinces like Diyala and Salahuddin tried to initiate bids for forming federal regions, and the crackdown by the government at the time of Noor al-Maliki was quite severe, and I think contributed to that souring of relations and domestic politics in Iraq, that and the radicalization that eventually created the poisonous mix from which ISIS emerged or was able to capitalize on.
Yeah, and I mean, Basra is a case where there are true, genuine grievances among the population because they are downstream from all that water and they see the pollution and waterborne diseases. And then you have the oil wealth that's being pulled from their governorate alone. And the people aren't feeling that they receive the benefits from that. I mean, what is the percentage of the revenue just coming from Basra alone?
Well, Basra accounts for about 75% of all oil production.
Wow.
So this leads people in Basra often complaining that they produce all the wealth and get all the burden, but none of the benefits. So that has always festered in I think in Basra.
So let's go to number 5, which is a concerning issue in terms of security in the region.
Yeah, it's concerning to some, but others really frame it as progress, as development, and that is the imminent acquisition by Iraq of advanced air defense systems coming from South Korea. Iraq signed a deal worth almost $3 billion in 2024 to obtain, I think, 8 batteries of a medium altitude advanced air defense systems. And this came after years of pressure and lobbying by factions in Iraq, including a lot of the militias, for improving Iraq's air defense capabilities. And this was even more hotly debated last summer during the 12-day war between Israel and Iran, when Iraq was a bystander while hundreds of missiles and fighter jets crisscrossed its airspace heading east or west. Of course, we know where we know the motivations of the militias that have been lobbying for Iraq's acquisition of such systems, because they see that Iraq should be playing a role in helping its eastern neighbor, Iran, in defending itself against Israel. And that's really where the risk, where the complexity emerges, that these are highly expensive, highly sophisticated, expensive systems that can be very capable, but also can be very vulnerable when acquired haphazardly and rushed into service against a also highly capable and threatening foe. I think there is a risk that it could put Iraq in a very difficult position in the next phase of conflict between Israel and Iran if and when that happens. You're damned if you use them, and you're damned if you don't.
Yeah, and of course, with those kinds of expenditures, there's an opportunity cost, right? You're spending money on
Hmm.
that, and you're not spending money on other things like education and water and things like that.
And this is actually absolutely true in a country that's facing serious economic concerns or serious economic problems that are expected to accelerate in 2026. And this is actually our story number six, I guess, is the anticipation of economic trouble in Iraq in the new year. And in December, the Iraqi government actually initiated a series of austerity measures to try and cut spending and increase revenue. But a lot of observers think it's too little, too late,
Mhm.
because the whatever savings you're going to generate are going to be too small, a drop in the bucket in compared to government expenses, and that any increases in revenue are will be coming from non-oil revenue and non-oil sources, which are also going to be, very small in a country where oil revenue accounts for 95% of government income.
So you're saying that the economic downturn has to do with the price of oil.
Of course, yeah. And if you look at the trends in oil prices over 2025, they have been trending downwards. And there are concerns that, I think oil started the year above 70, and now it's below 60.
Wow.
And that's danger zone for Iraq economically. If this trend continues, then the Iraqi government might not be able to meet its obligations. If it defaults on salaries, then that can be very, very destabilizing for Iraq.
Yeah, we've seen this also like in the Kurdistan region when the Kurdistan region was under so much strain because it wasn't able to produce its own oil and gas, right?
Right.
Because of the conflict with Baghdad. And what the government in the Kurdistan region does, what the government, I think, in the federal government in Baghdad will always do is they prioritize salaries for
Hmm.
obvious reasons because it's about stability. But as a result, like there's infrastructure projects that are stalled.
Hmm.
There's investments, critical investments that need to be made. Education spending, helping to modernize the canals, the waterways. All of that gets sidelined because they don't have the revenue.
And that, I think, perfectly segues into our seventh story.
Yes. Oh, this is a big one. So number 7, it's the severe drought. This past year, Iraq saw the worst drought it's seen since 1933. We're talking very serious ramifications. I mean, it affects the agricultural sector. And I know that there are some viewers that might be thinking of Iraq as all deserts. It's not. There's plenty of agriculturally rich, productive land. But it is a drying country, and it really does need the delivery of that water. It needs the irrigation systems. All of that is under threat. So we could see the agricultural sector continuing to get hit very hard because of that. Also, it's not just about the lack of quantity of water, it's also the quality of water and the amount of pollution going into the waterways and how it affects communities downstream, especially in places like Basra, where you have not only the problem with lack of fresh water because of salinity, the salinization of the water, and the encroachment of the waters coming from the Gulf, but you also have, the pollution coming downstream to the point where you have waterborne diseases, and it's really impacting the public health of the country. So water, I think that will continue to be a top story that anybody that cares about Iraq needs to continue to follow.
Yeah, and it has been actually water scarcity has been a major driver, if not the primary driver, of internal displacement within Iraq in the post-ISIS period. I think data from IOM, the International Organization for Migration, put the number, and this is probably 6 or 7 months ago, at nearly 180,000 Iraqis displaced by water scarcity, and the numbers are rising. And Iraq is going through this. I think there's a critical junction that the country is going through right now. And that leads to our next story about international engagement in Iraq.
Yeah, so we will be going into 2026. This will be the first year where Iraq will not have the presence of the UN Assistance Mission in Iraq, UNAMI. UNAMI's mandate is over as of this month. So we will be entering new territory. This is, of course, UNAMI is a legacy of the US-led invasion of Iraq back in 2003 and the ongoing special political mission of the UN on the ground there. That is now over. So what that means is that you have the absence of what has been an international watchdog. You don't have the UN presence to provide electoral assistance for, free and fair elections. You look at the Tishreen movement and the human rights reporting that was happening, all of which is, I think, really, really important. There will no longer be those briefings at the Secretary General's
to the UN Security Council.
To the UN Security, the quarterly reports. You won't have that reporting anymore. Also, this will be the first year that you will not have U.S. aid. The U.S. assistance or the U.S. Agency of International Development because of Elon Musk and Doge and the Trump administration. So without U.S. aid, it's going to impact a number of things because U.S. aid has always had a lot of programs on the ground in Iraq. But I think one that we're deeply concerned about has to do with the clearance of mines and explosive remnants of war. USAID always played a huge role, was the number one funder of those programs. And Iraq is one of the most heavily mined, most contaminated in terms of explosive remnants of war places in the world. And there's still that ongoing need. And from
I think at least this last year, we've been seeing consistently that the casualty figures from unexploded remnants of war have outnumbered casualties from deliberately placed IEDs by remnants of ISIS. So it is a serious security threat especially to rural communities living along Iraq's long borders with Iran and with Kuwait, with Saudi Arabia, with Syria. Large swaths of the country that are contaminated with unexploded ordnance, mines, IEDs left from the war with ISIS that come, especially during the rain season, they're washed over. They rise to the surface and they start hurting a lot of the farmers in areas that are contaminated. So serious threat there.
It also reminds me, part of that story to follow in UNAMI being gone, USAID being gone, is the extent to which the Iraqi government and even the local governments at the municipal level, at the governorate level, the regional government in the Kurdistan region, to what extent they step up to begin to fill that gap and to continue the operations to clear the explosive remnants of war and mines, as well as other programs that are important for the social fabric of Iraq and the Kurdistan region. So, story to watch. Going to story number 9.
Story number 9 is linked to previous stories we talked about, infrastructure, oil, and the economic woes that Iraq is dealing with. And this is the stability of the breakthrough oil deal between Baghdad and Erbil that led to the resumption of oil exports from the Kurdistan region through Turkey after being halted for 2.5 years. This is the lifeline of economy in the Kurdistan region, and of course a significant boost to Iraq's oil exports. Potentially could lead to more than 500,000 barrels of oil per day flowing into the market. Right now, oil has been, flowing at a rate of about 200,000 barrels per day. Again, significant impact in that when oil flows, people in the Kurdistan region get paid. And without that, economy enters into a state of stasis. So a couple of things to watch for here. First, of course, government formations, what the next government in Baghdad is going to look like, what the next government in Erbil is going to look like, and also the disarmament of militias who have been trying to spoil the deal. They have attacked oil fields and gas fields in the Kurdistan region multiple times in 2025 and have been trying to sour relations between the prime minister and Erbil. Have been trying to sabotage the deal. So that's something definitely to watch for. The deal continues to require periodic renewals, actually, to continue. And more importantly, perhaps, or equally as important, is the fact that the entire treaty bilateral treaty between Iraq and Turkey that governs the use of the Iraq-Turkey pipeline through which the oil passes, is up for renewal in 2026, in July of 2026. And Turkey has expressed strong interest in renegotiating the deal. So the terms that Turkey is going to push for could significantly impact the future of oil exports from the Kurdistan region. But enough about stressful things. I believe that we have a genuinely positive story for number 10.
Yes, we do have a positive story. Iraq's World Cup dreams. Believe it or not, after the brilliant win in Basra against the United Arab Emirates, Iraq is in the running. The national team will be advancing to the global playoffs in March 2026. So they are just one step away from qualifying for the first FIFA World Cup since 1986.
Yeah, I remember that one. I was a little kid then.
Yeah.
First grade.
Yeah, it's amazing. So, and I mean, there's a lot of team members to watch, but I'll just give you one name to watch is the midfielder, Iraq's midfielder, Amir Al-Amari. This is a young guy who was born in Sweden to, and I believe, an Iraqi father and a Palestinian mother, and has been like just one of the amazing players to watch. So yeah, so that should be exciting, something to look forward to for the new year.
Despite this uncertainty, there is always room for talent and hope to persist and push through.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, so a great cause for national pride and unity. So something to look forward to. So those are the top 10 stories to be following and watching for the new year, 2026. Happy New Year for everybody that's watching. Stories that have, I think, high stakes: political, economic, environmental, humanitarian. So we'll be following that. You can also follow it with us every week with the Iraq Security and Humanitarian Monitor that you publish for us. You write for us every week. So continue to follow the stories at enablingpeace.org. And we'll also include some links down below so that you can take a deeper dive into the stories that we've been talking about. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's, I think, anyone who cares about what happens in Iraq, anyone who has a stake in Iraq, who has Iraq in their story, for them, I think, if you're one of those people, then understanding these developments is key to knowing really what to do about it and knowing how to be able to support prosperity, peace, and development in Iraq. And, well, for us, this is our mission. So that's why we keep close eye on these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that mission, we are in the year-end fundraising phase. So all donations up until December 31st will be matched dollar for dollar. So please consider making a contribution. We'll include a link to donate in down below as well. So if you value this kind of nonpartisan, in-depth analysis, consider supporting EPIC now and into the new year. Thanks so much for watching, and we hope that you have a happy, peaceful new year.
Ma salama.
Ma salama.